So the Module 7, 7th lecture, Air Freight Transport Marketing. So the focus questions that we're seeking to answer today are: what is marketing environment's impact on the development of air freight marketing strategies? Who is the customer in the movement of air cargo? What are the main air freight market segments? And how are the 7 Ps addressed in developing air freight's marketing mix? Now, there's quite a few readings. I wouldn't necessarily be put off by the number of readings. Most of those readings are probably 1 or 2 pages, and they provide a level of clarification on the areas of the lecture that I'm going to talk about today. And in an effort to make it a little bit more clear for you, in the brackets at the end of each of the readings, I've put what the reading is actually about. So, for example, the first readings 1 and 2 from Shaw, it's 3 or 4, 2 pages and then another 3. That relates to the customer. So if you're seeking some clarity around who the customer is, what is a customer, you can use that particular reading, and so on and so forth. So then we've got Morel, segmentation example, the marketing environment, the air cargo product, the promotion, distribution, promotion again, distribution, pricing. There's an optional one on pricing if you want to go into the nth degree. And then those 3 other elements that set a service apart from a typical product, which is people, physical evidence, and processes. So I'll be seeking to provide some level of clarity on that today. And as I said, if any elements of it that you're uncertain of, just let me know. So what better starting point than to ask the question, what is marketing? And according to the UK Chartered Institute of Marketing, it's a management process. So it's another one of those management processes. So last week we looked at scheduling, we looked at fleet management, and in our discussions with that, marketing came up on a number of occasions. So marketing is integrated into all elements of management, and it's typically to do with anticipating, identifying, and satisfying customer requirements. So when we think about marketing, we're thinking about the customer. The 2 things are interconnected. From a visual perspective, on one hand you've got the cargo airline, and on the other hand you've got a range of different products that the cargo airline is ready and able to carry. What the customer needs to understand, probably more than anything else, is who are the customers of those products, because ultimately the customers of those products are going to be purchasing the services of an air cargo carrier. So marketing is actually matching the customer requirements, needs and wants. And it does this by a range of different options at its disposal, which is commonly referred to as the marketing mix. So the approach we're going to take today is a planning approach to marketing. There's 3 main areas: a situation analysis, marketing objectives, and strategies and tactics. So we're going to focus on individually on each of those 3 areas. Each of those areas in some ways actually relate to this idea of anticipating, identifying, satisfying. So the situation analysis is about anticipating, the marketing objectives are about identifying, and strategies and tactics are about satisfying. So in a little bit more detail, the situation analysis is made up of 2 parts. It's understanding what's happening outside of your business and it's understanding what's happening inside of your business. So there's two different elements, and in many ways it's the current situation as it stands at that particular point in time. The external environment, so what's happening outside your business, is typically made up of macro factors, big picture issues, and also micro factors which relate to the actual industry that you find yourself in. In addition to the external, you need to have a good understanding of your own business. And the reason why that you're actually doing this is to put you in a good position to make strategic decisions for your organisation. Once you've done that research, and then you're in a position to make some decisions about the customers that you think are appropriate for your particular products. So you're going to undertake a market segmentation, putting customers into groups, and then you're going to set some goals for yourself against each of those customer groups. So we're going to look at that particular process, and finally you're going to get to what we call the marketing mix, or those elements within your business that you can control yourself to encourage the customer to buy your particular service. And they include the product, your promotion, distribution, price, and those three other elements that set a service apart: the physical evidence, the process, and the people. So first and foremost, your first task is to understand what's happening outside of your business. Now, in many ways, this is really just a research activity. In most cases, if you're undertaking, you're looking at the external environment, you're undertaking research, you're looking at secondary data, so it's quite possible it may even be a task of a graduate employee to the organisation, might be tasked with finding out what's happening in the external environment. In addition to this, you also want to know what's happening in the air cargo industry itself. It's quite relevant to actually how you conduct your business. So when we talk about this idea of external to the environment, or big macro factors, we're talking about those issues which could be of a political nature, they could be of an economic nature, it might be environmental issues, it could be legal issues, it could be to do with technology. So essentially your task there is to investigate all those areas to see what might be impacting on your business. Now, some of those things are actually going to be good for your business. Some of those things are not going to be so good, and it's important that you shortlist what those issues are. Now, that's an example of some of the issues that you might be finding research on in the external environment. So it's issues around government policy. It's how government impacts on your ability to do business. We know that government plays a strong role in air service agreements and bilateral agreements to gain airspace in particular countries. And each of those particular elements that you see there could have a ramification for your business. The thing about the external environment is where opportunities lie for your business. It's also the area that threats lie for your business. So each and every one of those elements may have a positive or negative impact on your organisation. So in a normal state of affairs, what you would be doing is gathering salient information on any of those topics to present as background for any decisions you're going to make within your organisation. Now, for example, one of those elements there highlighted was changes in technology or innovation. One of the biggest innovations, particularly that has impacted on the air cargo industry in recent years, has been e-commerce. Effectively, we've seen a doubling of e-commerce, and that presents a real opportunity for the air cargo industry. So it has a positive impact because consumers have been shown to pay a premium and are willing to pay that premium for air cargo. Now, I guess when we think of e-commerce, typically it's aligned with express carriage or integrators because they want a fulfilled service. However, it is also flowing through to scheduled combination and air cargo carriers. So this is potentially a strong opportunity for an air cargo business. Now, once you've looked at those external factors, those big picture issues that might impact on your business, it's then important that you have a look at those issues in regards to the industry that you're working in. So you're working in the air cargo, aviation industry, so you need to be across issues such as market growth, you need to understand who your competitors are, you need to understand what the demand is and how to actually succeed in the industry itself. And that's just a number of issues that you might want to investigate that could have, once again, a negative or a positive impact on your business. Bearing in mind, any of those issues could be an opportunity for your business, and any of those issues could be a threat for your business. I've just pulled one of those out, and that's just in time. So what we're seeing is a movement towards this managerial approach to inventory control, which is just in time. It has been shown to really benefit the air cargo industry. So we've got a global value chain, such as the one that we see here. This is an example of a multinational offshoring of production. So we've got Ford. They've set up a manufacturing facility in Europe. They're able to take advantage of most of the supplies of their products from Europe. However, they have to go as far afield as Mexico, South Africa and Spain to get other parts. That lends itself to the air cargo involvement, because air cargo can offer a number of advantages, which most of them we already know. So they can offer lower packaging costs, they can get the product to the customer a lot quicker, so they can improve cash flow. They can reduce safety stocks, so you don't have to have a large inventory in a particular market. And you can undertake some centralised warehousing using air cargo. So that's just one of those many issues that are occurring in the industry that may be an opportunity for your business. Now, once you've gone ahead and you've undertaken all this research, what do you do with it? Well, what you've got to do is that you've got to do something meaningful with that information. So you've got to find a model, you've got to find some way of formatting to enable you to interrogate the data, to enable you to utilise the data to support your decisions. And one of the most simplest methods in doing this is what's called a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is centred around the acronym. I'm assuming most people here would have come across a SWOT analysis. If you haven't, it's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So when we look at the external environment, we're only interested in opportunities or threats. Opportunities are trends, changes, things happening in the external environment that could actually enhance your ability to do business. A threat is the contrary, so it's an unfavourable situation in the external environment that could have a negative impact on your business. And it's really important that you identify what those opportunities and threats are. So, based on that process that we just used in identifying the external environment and the internal environment, we collect all that information together and we put it all under opportunities and we put it all under threats. Now, all of those issues are not going to be an opportunity and a threat. So the next step in that process for you is to say, okay, based on that information that I gathered, what could be an opportunity for my business? And in the same way, based on that information that I gathered, what could be a threat to my business? So an analysis of each and every one of the information that you've collected means that you delete a number of elements under the opportunities and you delete a number of elements under threats until you get to a point where you've shortlisted what are perceived as opportunities for your business and you've shortlisted threats for your business. Now, for most businesses, an opportunity presents a new business advantage for you moving forward with your business. A threat is potentially something that could impact negatively on your business. So to finalise this particular process that you've just gone through, you need to filter out the best opportunities and the worst threats, because you need to ensure that your business can either take advantage of the opportunities or mitigate against the threats. So if we look at those, in this particular example, I'm going to identify global economic trade conditions as a key opportunity for my business. I'm also going to point out that air cargo product growth rates are also a key opportunity for my business. And innovative and technology-based solutions are an opportunity for my business. So moving forward, I'll be looking for opportunities that meet the characteristics of those opportunities that I've identified. Now, I've done that for opportunities, and mindful that I could have chosen any number of other opportunities listed there if the research had told me that they were better opportunities than the ones that I've just selected. When it comes to threats, I've identified government policy, safety and security, that's a global perspective, terrorism and issues like that, access to airport terminals. So one of the issues with air cargo carriers moving in and out of hubs are the lack of slots, and also the issue around geographic two-way flow. And that's more about this idea that I select a geographic market to target with my products and services. And I can service that market really well one way. How do I deal with the fact that I don't perhaps have the opportunities to move cargo back to my home country? So that's the opportunities and threats side. Has anybody got any questions about that part of the SWOT analysis? Okay. That's one half of the task done with the SWOT analysis. The second half is understanding your own business. So that's working with everybody else in your organisation to get an understanding of how they're performing. Now, performance is relative, I guess. So there'd be industry standards that you'd be seeking to meet. And typically you want to understand your finance, your staffing levels, your physical resources, and also you need to critique how you're going about your own marketing. So when we look at the internal environment, in terms of finance, we're looking at what your costs of production are. What about your operating costs? Are they stable? Are they going up? Are they going down? How profitable are you as a business? Are you generating good yields? What about capital resources? Are you heavily in debt, or do you have some cash reserves which might present an opportunity for you to make an investment in new aircraft. What about payload factors? Are you meeting industry standards? Is there another opportunity for you to build on those payload factors? So as a business, you've got to find out about those various elements. In addition to that, what the staffing levels are, how are they placed? Are you meeting the requirements of your customer by having the appropriate staffing levels? Have you got the right managerial acumen within the organisation to undertake any form of expansion? And what sort of customer service levels are you delivering? Everybody in business these days is going to have some form of pulse check on how they're going for customer service. Is your customer service improving? Is it going down? Is there a requirement for more training? Physical resources. When we talk about physical resources, it's really, as much as anything, an audit on all the equipment and physical elements of your business. Your aircraft, the other physical aspects required to facilitate your business. And finally, you need to critique your own marketing. Is your business strategy a successful one? What about your marketing mix? Is that working for you? Have you got a broad product range or is it narrow? Do you think you might need to differentiate that product range? Have you got a good brand awareness? And do you have much experience in the market? All of those things, similar to the external environment, you've got to investigate and report on, and you get to a point where what you're looking for out of all those things are going to be strengths and weaknesses. Strength being something internal to your business that gives you an advantage in the marketplace, something that sets you apart perhaps from your competitors. Weakness being something internally in your business that perhaps isn't working well for you. It's been identified of something that's limiting your performance. The thing about strengths and weaknesses can only be found in within your own business. So, in the same way that we address the external environment, we're going to also address the internal environment, and we're going to list all of those characteristics under strengths and weaknesses. And then we're going to go through each of those characteristics, and we're going to filter out those characteristics that you don't believe should be in strengths. And you're going to filter out all those characteristics that you don't believe are in weaknesses. What you'd be hoping is something like this particular scenario, where you've got more strengths than you have weaknesses. If you had more weaknesses than you had strengths, then you've probably got something to worry about as a business. So in this particular scenario, you've got to this point, you need to now make some form of decision about what your key strengths are. Because your key strengths are going to support the approach you take with your marketing. You also want to know what your key weaknesses are, because you want to fix that up. If you don't fix up your weaknesses, it could be a negative impact for you further down the track. So in this particular scenario, I've just pulled out a few strengths here. The first one is capital resources and performance. So what that's saying is that I'm performing well in regards to my cash and my capital resources. So I've got cash in the bank. Also, I've got a strength in maintenance and air crews. So I've got those situated very well within my network. So that's a real strength of what I do. I've got the costs associated with that down quite low. And another strength is my business strategy and marketing mix, which is always good news for anybody within an organisation to find out that their business strategy is a strength of the organisation. And I'm good at what I do in regards to the marketing mix. I've also got a positive brand awareness. Now, in terms of weaknesses, I've got an issue with my payload factors. That's suggesting to me that I've got capacity unused, and my payload factors perhaps could be a little bit better than what they are. I've got a weakness in my production equipment. So there's a potential issue I've got in regards to my aircraft, and that might be an issue that I might need to address. Bearing in mind, I have got some significant capital resources, so that may present an opportunity to invest in new aircraft. I've also got an issue in regards to my product range. So I'm currently offering a range of services to my customer, but the suggestion here is that perhaps that could be expanded. De Wolf suggested that cargo airlines with a broad product portfolio are seen to perform better than cargo airlines with a more narrow portfolio. So that could be an issue that I need to consider. Once I've done that, I'm at a point where I've finalised my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and I'm going to use that information to inform my business strategy and the next steps in the marketing planning process. Has anybody got any questions about the SWOT? Okay. So, based on the SWOT, yeah.
Are they the major factors? Because I noticed that they're different right now. They were the same before. I selected like the more important ones for.
So I started off with, say, take this segment here. Started off with, say, double that number, and the business then filters them out, of which are more relevant to be in the strengths category. So I would have taken a number of strengths out of that to come up with that final number. And I did the same with weaknesses. I started off with a much bigger number and I've gone, right, okay, well, they're not all weaknesses, so you filter that out. So that's, I guess, that analysis process of there could be an odd word or two out that I might have deleted, but it should be match those last couple of slides that I put through. Yeah? And I've done that for opportunities and threats as well. Now, moving on from there, that's the first part. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the situation analysis, which we just did. I'm now going to look about the marketing objectives, and then we'll have a short break. So the marketing objectives is this idea of identifying who it is that you want to do business with. Now, the marketing objectives is based on a two-step process. So the first step, you've got to undertake a form of market segmentation. Market segmentation is simply putting customers into groups and targeting those customers with your products and services. That's the first part. And associated with this idea of segmenting the market is establishing a goal. So you've got to set a goal for each of those particular markets. It's just good business practice. So that somewhere down the track, you can 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, you can get some form of determination of whether you've been successful in your marketing efforts. So intertwined with this idea of market segmentation is the customer and who the customer is. And essentially the customer for an air cargo carrier is either the person that is shipping the goods, but it could also be the person who is shipping the goods for somebody else, so an intermediary. So there's two options in regards to who the customer is. So you can, so that the shipper, that the person who manufactures the goods, and the freight forwarder who's moving the goods. You could call both of them a customer. And ultimately, your task is to market towards the decision maker in both of these enterprises. So whether it's the shipper or whether it's the freight forwarder. Now, the idea of market segmentation is most relevant because if you didn't put your customers into groups of like-minded people who act in a certain way, then you would be marketing to individuals. And that particular process is infinitely more difficult than identifying a group and presenting your products and services to a collective. So that's the preferred approach. So this idea of market segmentation, as I said before, it's identifying the end customer and segmenting or putting them into groups. And these end customers are going to be groups of people who respond in a similar way to your marketing communications. Now, once the segmentation is complete, then you will be making some decisions about which of those segments you believe is going to be best for your products and services. And the way that you respond to that particular customer group is what we call the marketing mix. Now, I mentioned before that an air cargo customer can be not the end customer, it can be an intermediary such as the air freight forwarder. And this is quite a unique particular situation. And the reason why air freight forwarders are so important, not to everybody in the air cargo industry, but to the majority of people, is that they provide 90% of the bookings of air cargo. So they're a very important distribution medium for air cargo operators. And the air cargo operators that rely extensively on the freight forwarder are your all cargo operators, your freight forwarder, your combination carriers and your passenger carriers. They rely almost entirely on air freight forwarders, whereas the express carrier or integrator, they bypass the freight forwarder and they go direct to the customer. So there's a subtle difference, and it's mainly tied in with the business model of both those different groups. So ultimately, you've got this freight forwarder who holds quite a unique position in the air cargo industry as both a customer and a distribution channel. Now, why is the air freight forwarder in this unique position? It's to do with the services it can offer a shipper. One of the things that the air freight forwarder can do is that it can build up a small shipment into a large shipment. So if you've only got a few parcels or a small shipment, they can build a less than container load into a full container load. Now what that offers you as a shipper is cheaper rates, probably less packaging involved, probably less insurance that you need to worry about as well. So there's a lot of benefits that can come from using that freight forwarder. So in that regard, they're the most important distribution option for your all-cargo combination or passenger carriers. And as I said before, integrators, they bypass the freight forwarder, they go direct to the customer. It's just a different business model. Now, on to segmentation. When it comes to segmentation, that is a definition. Groups of potential customers with homogeneous attributes who are likely to exhibit similar responses to a company's marketing mix. Now, breaking that definition down, it is groups of potential customers who have got similar characteristics. And when they are communicated with, they typically respond in the same way. So that's essentially the rationale behind the segmentation. Now, there's a range of different parameters you can use to segment a market. You've got demographics, so you can use age, gender, occupation, family life cycle, income. You can look at the industry itself. All those characteristics allow you to segment a mass group of people. You could segment by virtue of geography. But if you are going to segment on geography, you probably have to use another characteristic as well, because geography only gives you a physical location. It doesn't tell you anything about the customer and how you might communicate with that customer. Lifestyle, so it could be psychographics, which are values and lifestyles and attitudes. Another option, and quite a popular option, and the option that we'll be working on, is this idea of benefits desired. So what does the shipper want to get out of a shipment of air cargo? Now, once you've gone through that process and you've determined the particular parameter that you're going to use, you then make a decision on which group within those variety of groupings that you're going to target. Now, there needs to be some form of reality check along the way, so you've got to ask yourself some questions after you've gone through the segmentation process. And the questions that you've got to ask yourself are things such as, are they truly different in a meaningful way? So have you been able to group those customers and make them different? Because unless they're different, your marketing towards those groups and your communication is not going to be very focused. It's going to be more of a scattergun approach. Are the segments big enough? So you've isolated some segments. Are they big enough to actually return a profit to you as a business? In the parameter that you used, do companies fall into that parameter clearly? So does it allow you to communicate with a group of customers? And are they easily identified? If they're not easy to identify, then that's going to make your task a lot harder. So that's just the reality check once you've done the segmentation and made a determination in that regard. Now, in lecture 4, we spoke a lot about the variety of commodities being moved around the globe. During that particular lecture, I introduced a segmentation process, and that segmentation process was based around this idea of a shipper's motivation for using air cargo and the urgency of that air cargo. That segmentation process that I spoke about back then, in lecture 4, we're going to use that same segmentation process in the example that I give today. And it's also going to be the same segmentation process that you will be asked about in question 1, I think, task 1. Which one? 2? 3. No, well, we'll see. But I think it's 1 and 3. But anyway, look, so just be mindful of that. So you can make a note of that. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to talk about this at a high level because I've already done that in lecture 4. We've also discussed it in tutorial 4. And it's actually a question that I'm asking in the assignment. So I'm just mindful that I'm giving you some high-level information and you've got to fill in the gaps based on the information that's already been presented. What we do know from using this segmentation process is the air cargo segment market can be divided into 4 groups and a number of subgroups. Those 4 groups are the emergency freight segment, which has got a number of subsegments, which is operating emergency, medical emergency, and marketing emergency. The second segment that we identified were high-value freight segment. Had some subsegments, which were liquid assets protection and cultural assets protection. The third segment that we identified and spoke about was the routine perishable freight segment, and there are a number of subsegments: physical perishable, temperature sensitive perishability, commercially perishable, and live perishable. And the fourth one that was identified and presented in Lecture 4 and also in Morel, the readings, was the routine non-perishable freight and subsegments. And I identified 4 segments there. Now, for a business that's just gone through a process of marketing segmentation, the question that the business is now asking themselves is, which of those segments I'm going to target with my products and services? So it's a simple process of identification of the segments, thinking about my situation, thinking about what's happening outside of my business, and making some decisions about which is the segment that's most appropriate for me. Has anybody got any questions about the market segmentation that we've utilised there? Now, once you've identified that market segment, which is that group of customers that you're going to communicate with and promote your products and services to, it's pretty important that you set yourself a goal. Now, your goal can be any number of things, but you probably want it to be something that you can measure over a period of time. So, for example, one of the good techniques for working out a goal is to use the Ansoff matrix. The Ansoff matrix is a process that just assists you in setting goals. And it looks something like this. Marketing goal setting is based on 2 things. It's based on products and it's based on markets. So ultimately, it's a matter of you making a decision one way or another on what type of goal you want to set for your business. Now, if you choose a market penetration goal, what you're actually doing is that you're determined to sell your existing products to an existing market. So, same products to the same market. If you choose a market development goal, you're choosing to sell your existing products to a new market. So, same product to a new market. Product development, new product to an existing market. And diversification, which is a totally new product and a totally new market. So when you're setting your goals, it's a decision-making process that is based around one of those choices. Now, that might look like something like this if you were writing it as a goal for your business. So if you chose the market penetration marketing goal, for example, you could write it in this manner. And I'm just using Qantas Freight in this particular example. Qantas Freight will increase existing product sales by 10% in the existing routine, non-perishable freight, high-tech electrical finished goods segment in the year 2019-20. So effectively what you're doing is that you're writing a goal allocated to the market segment you've chosen to sell your products. That's if you've selected the market penetration. And in the same manner, if it's market development, if it's product development, or it's diversification, it's just a way of presenting your goals if that's your chosen approach. So the third key area of this marketing planning framework, if you like, deals with strategies. And strategies are simply how you're going to do something. Now, at your disposal as a business, you've got a number of things that you can control. Typically, those things that you can control are what is called the marketing mix. Now, for a non-service, the marketing mix is typically referred to as the 4 Ps. Product, place, price and promotion. However, because you're dealing with a service, it's expanded further to what is called the 7 Ps, which includes people, physical evidence and the process of service production. So we're going to expand out the marketing mix to relate that back to air cargo. So when we talk about a product strategy, we're talking about how a particular business develops its approach to dealing with customers. So you've gone through a process, you've identified who your customer market is, and then it's a matter of matching what you've got within your business, which is made up of the marketing mix, to your customers. Now, typically, in determining that product, if you like, the product element of the strategy will include a range of tangibles and intangibles. Now, the tangible elements are those physical elements within your business. So the aircraft, all the equipment that you've got, any facilities that you've got, they're the tangible elements that you need within your business to satisfy your customer. The intangibles are those services, those promises that you make to your customer in regards to you delivering on their requirements. So it might be guarantee of delivery time, it might be warranties, it could be any number of things. So from a customer's point of view, the particular air cargo carrier is delivering a range of physical and non-physical elements which it interprets as a bundle of benefits which are satisfying their needs and wants. So every business who's shipping air cargo have got a number of needs and wants in terms of getting that cargo to the final destination. And it's up to the air cargo carrier to make sure it can meet those expectations. So that's the product element of it. Now, when you're thinking about the product element of your marketing mix, it's strongly influenced by a couple of things. The first thing is what your business model is. And what we know is the business model of combination airlines, passenger airlines, and also all-cargo airlines are quite different from the business model of the express carrier. So that's one aspect of making decisions about what you need within your business. The other aspect is who is your chosen target market? Because marketing is all about the customer. What do you need to provide to the customer to satisfy their needs and wants? If you don't have the right equipment, you don't have the right aircraft, you can't provide the cool chain, then you're not going to be successful in meeting the needs and wants of your customer. So that's your challenge, I guess, in many ways. So considerations to you in regard to the target markets are, if we're going to target a group of customers that have live animals, for example, what do I need to have within my business to ensure that live animals get from departure to destination in good shape? If I'm targeting businesses that have pharmaceutical products, what do I need to have in place as an air cargo business to make that work? And that's really the underlying principle of marketing, is matching what the customer is seeking within your own business in both a physical sense and an intangible sense. So in light of your customer, it might reflect on how the type, the make and the size of the aircraft that you have in your fleet. So you wouldn't have a particular aircraft of a particular type of nature that wasn't consistent with the target market requirements. So it could be, if you're targeting, for example, if you're a passenger airline and you're targeting large air cargo, for example, that's not going to go too well for you because you haven't got the aircraft to actually meet the needs of that particular target market. So that wouldn't be a good move in your respect. You've also got to design a route network which is also going to meet the needs and requirements of your customer. So is it going to be a point-to-point or is it going to be a hub and spoke? So, or hub and feed, if you like. What about the market range? What sort of flights are you going to have in your airline scheduling? Are they going to be short, medium, long haul? How does that meet the requirements of your customer? So these are just some considerations that you need to have in your own mind when you're making decisions about your product strategy, customer service levels as well. Now, for scheduled and all cargo carriers, I'll separate them a little bit from integrators. Scheduled, combination and air cargo carriers, we probably shouldn't lose sight of the fact that their main offer is an airport-to-airport offer. So, whereas your integrator, that's from the end customer to the end destination. So it's two different approaches to the service offer. So with the scheduled combination and all cargo carrier, they have to rely very heavily on the freight forwarder because they're only dealing with what happens in and around the airport. And it's up to the freight forwarder to fill out the other elements of that multimodal service or bimodal service. Now, there's two main service components of a scheduled combination and an all-cargo carrier. And one relates to the ground services. So they've got to facilitate what happens on the ground once the goods arrive at the airport. And then, of course, they've got to provide the air services. So they're the two main elements of the combination and all cargo carriers. So when they think about the inventory of what my needs have to be, it's based around the airport-to-airport type situation. Now, when we talk about ground services, type of services that you would expect from a combination carrier or an all-cargo carrier are going to be things associated with accepting shipments at the airport. They will be in a position where they need to review and prepare documentation. They've also got to oversee movements at the airport in preparation for loading. Now, depending on your customer market, will depend on the type of equipment that you have at the airport to service those customers. So if your customers have special handling items, then the type of equipment and processes that you have at the airport have got to reflect that. If you're dealing with temperature-controlled shipments, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can actually maintain a cool chain. So you're most likely going to have temperature controlled ULDs. You're probably going to have cool dollies. You're going to have warehouses which are cool warehouses. So once again, when you're thinking about what you need to present in terms of your product, it's reflective of that customer market. In addition to your ground services, of course, you're also providing the aircraft, and you're providing the delivery times. You might provide some level of track and trace, so there might be some technology involved there. You're also making decisions about the frequency of the services, and once again, that's to match your customer requirements. Ultimately, you'll also be making fleet management decisions, what type of aircraft you've got in your fleet, what the payload potential is with the aircraft, what the load restrictions are of the aircraft as well. Once again, all designed to meet the needs of your customer group. Now, an example of how you might go about that, if you were articulating to me what your product strategy is for an all-cargo airline, it also goes with a combination airline or a passenger airline. I've selected a segment, so you've got to articulate it based on your market segment that you're servicing. So this particular market segment is the routine perishable freight, physical perishable segment. So to service that, I would need some seamless integration with the freight forwarder to maintain some form of cool chain. I've got to offer a range of non-stop long-haul flights to a range of international destinations. I've got to be prepared to take goods at short notice, and I've got to be able to provide fast delivery times. I'm going to have efficient services on the ground and the appropriate equipment to satisfy that target market. Now, if we're dealing with the physical perishable, I might not need a temperature controlled ULD, which is quite an expensive device. But I would definitely need some form of perhaps thermal blankets or ice to maintain that cool chain, particularly in extreme temperatures. I'm most likely going to have some form of automated tracking, and I will be striving to achieve a high level of customer service and staff commitment. So that's how I would articulate my product strategy for an all-cargo airline. Of course, it's a little bit different with an integrator or an express carrier because they go, direct to the customer. So their service offer is very different from that of the all-cargo and combination carrier. The all-cargo and combination carrier are airport to airport. The integrator is a door-to-door service. So quite different in many ways. Now, while they may need to outsource, most of what they do, they take full responsibility for the movement of those goods. And it's underpinned by a range of characteristics that make the express carrier pretty unique. And that is that they're vertically integrated. Now, by that we mean that every element in that door-to-door service is owned by the integrator. They own the trucks, they own the equipment, they own the aircraft. Perhaps they might lease out some of those aircraft, but typically that's the model. They will either own the terminals or they'll have a very long lease on the terminals as well, or the ground handling as well. So they're vertically integrated. They've got a high sophistication in technology, so highly sophisticated in how they track and trace their products. Each time the product is moving through the supply chain, it's being scanned, so it's pretty unique in that regard. And they also have automated sorting procedures which are pretty well unique to the integrator. and utilising that hub and spoke type location. If an example of how the integrator might articulate their product strategy, and I've chosen a different market segment. This market segment is actually pretty appropriate for the integrator because we know that integrators do that door-to-door service, so it's, in many cases they're required for urgent shipment. So I've chosen the segment of the emergency freight segment, operating emergency segment. So they're going to provide a door-to-door service with all the documentation and customs clearance included. They're going to provide a timetable of guaranteed departure and overnight delivery. They're going to have a fleet of modern freighters and surface transport. And they're going to deliver to a multiple number of destinations, both national and international. High level of customer service and staff commitment. The appropriate equipment to meet the needs of the customer. And as I said before, high level of sophistication when it comes to tracking and tracing those goods as they move through the supply chain. Has anybody got any questions about the product strategy element of the marketing mix? Okay. The next step for the development of the marketing mix is a level of attention to promotion. Now, a promotion is how you communicate with your customer. There's a range of different mechanisms you can use to communicate with your customer. You can use advertising. You can use personal selling. Personal selling is that face-to-face building of relationships, seeking to persuade somebody to use your service. You can use publicity. Publicity is a much sought-after form of advertising or promotion, because generally when you read an article about a particular product or service, and it's not an advertisement, it is deemed to be more believable. Or you could undertake direct marketing, sales promotion. So you've got a range of different options at your disposal. Now, depending on what sort of business model you've got, will depend on what element you will emphasise in terms of your promotion. So when we talk about scheduled combination and all cargo carriers, when it comes to promotion, the emphasis is not on the end customer, it's actually on the freight forwarder. And the reason for that is that the freight forwarder needs to understand your products and services because they're ultimately making the decisions on 90% of the sales of air cargo. So they're very important. So if you were an all-cargo carrier or a combination carrier, you'll most likely want to represent yourself to the senior management of freight forwarding organisations. You want them to know about what you can deliver on behalf of the end customer. So that's how you would approach that. And what you'd be hoping is that you can build a long-term relationship with a freight forwarder, so when it comes to making decisions about who they're going to use to move the cargo, they're going to come to your company. One of the things in that regard that you probably shouldn't forget is that there are other people in the organisation, usually at the lower levels, who make key decisions about routes and who you use for air cargo. And they're often the clerks in the office. So you shouldn't forget about those in regards to your marketing. Now, one of the areas where combination carriers have got a bit of an advantage over air cargo carriers is because combination carriers have passenger aircraft and they have freighter aircraft. So the combination carrier can leverage their brand towards the passengers who are flying on their passenger fleet. Now, they're doing that for a couple of reasons. They're doing that with a hope that the passenger goes back, speaks to his freight forwarder and says, by the way, next time you make a booking on my behalf, can you use Qantas Freight? I had a fantastic flight with those. I'd like you to use them. I've read about them in their Flight magazine. I'm not sure how often that happens, but potentially it is an option. And the other one is that the passenger themselves makes the decision to bypass the freight forwarder and make a direct booking on the website of the particular cargo airline. So if I were a all-cargo airline and I was putting together a promotional strategy, my form of emphasis there would be on personal selling. So I'd have a number of teams of sales reps on the road calling regularly on freight forwarding firms because it's really important for you to communicate what your service offer is to the people who are making the decisions. I would also look at opportunities to perhaps take out a stand at a trade show. It might be a logistics trade show, it could be an air cargo trade show, it could be an aviation trade show. I'd see that as a great opportunity for me to present myself to the people and delegates who are going to that particular trade show. I'd also be mindful that one really good medium to connect with people is at sporting events when you host people to those corporate hospitality, if you like, and build up a rapport with senior executives of organisations by taking them to a sporting event. Another option that you probably shouldn't discount is the idea of actually taking them through your facilities and showing them the facilities that you've got available in your own business to demonstrate your professionalism and your capability in a particular area. So if you've opened a new route to Singapore, for example, you might fly somebody, if you're dealing with a freight forwarder in Australia, you might fly somebody to Singapore, take them through your facilities, let them know what processes that you have with, I guess, a desire that when they get back to the business, they're going to choose your business to move their air cargo. I'm also going to advertise, so I'm going to select specific trade journals and trade press to put some targeted advertising about my services. I'm also going to keep in contact with, I guess, the news media with a view of getting a good news story. I might open a particular new product line and that might be deemed newsworthy by a particular media channel. I'm going to ensure that I've got a fully functioning website as well, so another thing I'll do. And I've got a range of other options at my disposal as required. Direct marketing, sales promotions, social media, for example. Now, as I said, the approach taken by all cargo carriers and express carriers are different. And the main difference there is that the promotion by the integrator or express carrier is direct to the end customer. As a consequence of this, the integrator puts a huge emphasis on mass marketing. So they're marketing to the masses and they use and put significant resources into advertising. So they put it into TV, newspaper, online radio. They invest significantly in there to reach out to the end customer. They also spend a lot of funds in event marketing. They often take naming rights sponsorships out to a range of different events. They also would undertake some publicity along the way, no doubt. And they've got a fully functioning website with booking options as well. And as required, other forms of media that they might deem appropriate at an appropriate point in time. Has anybody got any questions about the promotional side of the marketing mix? Okay, the third P, if you like, that third element of the marketing mix. It's called place, but it's more commonly referred to as distribution. And essentially, place or distribution is where you place your products so somebody can come and buy them. As simple as that. Now, for the air cargo business, there's two main approaches that pretty well all businesses are going to have. One is if you go direct to the business and you make that purchase. So it's customers buying the product from you direct. The other option is that they do it through an intermediary, and such as a freight forwarder. So the two main mechanisms that you probably find all cargo carriers would have in terms of distribution. Or perhaps you might have a retailer in place, just depending on what the marketing channel is. In terms of your own outlook as a business, two areas that you need to consider in this regard are that you've got enough channels going to the end customer. So if a channel to the end customer is a freight forwarder, you want to ensure that you've communicated enough to those freight forwarders for them to take up your offer of utilising your services. And also you've got coverage to enable a purchase to be made. So you've got everything in place on the back end to ensure that that freight forwarder, when they determine that they want to make a booking, they can do that with you. Now, an example of a combination of all cargo carriers' distribution strategy is going to be something like this. It's primarily directed at freight forwarders and consolidators. Now, one of the other reasons why freight forwarders are so important to an air cargo carrier is that they can offer a range of other services beyond what the air cargo operator can offer. They also can provide documentation and collect payment. So that's a big impost that the air cargo carrier doesn't have to worry about. That can be done by the freight forwarder. So they make themselves very important in that regard. And of course, the other key area, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, is consolidation. And we know that consolidation is so important to the shipper because it's a cost saving. It's an economical option for them. They can save costs, they can save insurance, they can save on packaging. So there's a range of different options there. So this value adding option, if you like, by the freight forwarder makes them integral to all cargo and combination carriers. As well as this, most of the communications between the freight forwarder and also the all cargo carrier or combination carrier is automated by computers. So it's quite a seamless process. And there are some other distribution options, but in the main, it's going to be your freight forwarder. Now, this is very different from your integrator. This is very different from your express carrier because their point of sale is actually direct to the customer. They do very little marketing towards the freight forwarder. So in the United States, you could expect to walk into a FedEx office and make a booking, organising a shipment. Of course, they put a major emphasis on website and telephone, and they've got a range of sophisticated technology to support that. Ultimately, organisations like FedEx and UPS, they want to have a standalone website which reflects all their market segments that they can service and without any other sort of face-to-face interface. Anybody got any questions in regards to distribution? Yep. Okay, pricing, fourth P. Pricing is essentially how much you're going to charge your customers. So what your customers are asked to pay. Now, the thing about price setting, it's really important that you've got a strong understanding of your cost structure. So you need to know your operational costs, your marketing costs, your distribution costs, These all need to go into a decision-making process in regards to how much you're going to price your product. Mindful that you're dealing with a customer market, so you've also got to understand what your customers are prepared to pay, as well as what your competitors are charging. So that mix of information is what you require in terms of making that decision about pricing. For an air cargo airline, it's got some unique challenges, and typically this has got to do with the issue of weight and density, minimum charges, and typically the default or basic price is a weight setting. Of course, that will increase based on the city pairs that you're dealing with and the distance that you're travelling. In addition, I suppose one of those unique things about size is that the size of the shipment increases, the per pound, per kilo rate decreases. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying any less, but you're paying a little bit less over a longer distance. And also, density is a key issue in regards to, so if you've got a very low density, you can quite simply fill out an aircraft, but with a low weight, and so it's usually converted to a weight factor to make that a more viable option for you in a price setting. So for scheduled combination and all cargo carriers, for freighter operators, it's a little bit easier because freighter operators are not dealing with passengers. They're essentially dealing with the movement of air cargo only. So it's a little bit easier. So all they really have to do is cover the cost of the aircraft and all the inputs that go into that aircraft to get it from airport to airport, and ultimately achieve a profit along the way. For combination carriers, it's more challenging. Combination carriers in a passenger aircraft type setting, we know that the goods are carried in the belly hold. That is more challenging because it's making a determination about what contribution the cargo is making to the overall costs. And the main focus is really about passengers, so that makes it a little bit tricky. I suppose the general consensus is that to have an effective price setting structure, the airline should really do the best it possibly can to differentiate out those cargo costs from the passenger costs to make it a more meaningful decision. In a general sense, in many cases, pricing these days is more about market pricing. So it's recognition of those issues about supply and demand, and it's also in recognition that some routes are going to have an imbalance, and your expectation of asking a higher price on an imbalanced route is going to be perhaps a little bit more challenging. For express operators, one of the things about the pricing of express air cargo is that it's high. It's a premium service, so there's an expectation that the pricing there is going to be high. And this has been championed over the years with small urgent shipments by virtue of FedEx, UPS and DHL. I guess an interesting dynamic and a bit of a challenge for express carriers now is that they are starting to move into different types. They're starting to move into general air cargo, but ultimately your express carrier, their core business is still going to be small parcels and small packages. Typically the pricing approach by integrators are going to be based on the dimensions of the product versus the weight. So some form of decision around that particular, so the length, width and height of the package versus the weight. And typically, once that calculation's made, whichever one's going to be the higher one is the one that they will charge. Any questions about pricing? People. Now, people is that element that sets services apart from any other form of marketing, just a product that doesn't have people in it. So, and every air cargo service involves a interaction between the staff of the air cargo airline and either the integrator staff or the end shipper. Now, one of the things that we know about interactions that people have with other people is that they're strongly influenced by whether they actually perceive that service as being a good service or not. So, with that in mind, air cargo carriers and lots of services industry invest a lot of resources in training their staff and ensuring that their staff are highly motivated. It's been shown that whether a client is happy with a particular service comes down to issues around knowledge, how helpful the staff is, and in some cases how friendly the staff is. So ultimately, the interactions that services staff have in air cargo carriers are built on this idea of developing a trusting relationship. And in some cases, you can build that trusting relationship to the point where the person who's delivering the service almost embodies the service themselves. So they become inseparable from the service. So as I said before, the air cargo business has got a twofold approach. They've got to focus on training, but they've also got to focus on motivating their staff to make a difference and provide good customer service. So they're investing significant resources into this particular area, and in the main they're doing this so that they separate themselves from competitors. Let's not lose track of the fact that most air cargo services are going to be provided by 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 different businesses. So with your marketing communications, it's all about seeking to provide something unique to your customers, which is going to make them choose you over another similar type of business. And it may be that the people that you've got working for you just might make that little bit of difference as to why you ring up and you book that air cargo service. The other element that makes services unique and different is physical evidence. So physical evidence is about those physical surroundings of the service delivery. So it could be interactions that you have, impressions that the customer gets from the delivery of the service. So if they have to go in and they have to drop off some goods somewhere, they'll build up a perception of their surroundings. If they arrive at the airport and they view the aircraft, or they look at the equipment, or a truck turns up, all these physical elements are making, are resonating in the customer's mind in terms of the particular service. So to that end, and to appear as professional as you possibly can, you need to be mindful of the layout of buildings, the type of aircraft, and other infrastructure and equipment that you've got. This can even extend to the appearance of staff. So if you turn up and you're having an interaction with some service staff, you're going to be mindful, not in all cases, depends on the situation you find yourself in. You'll probably be mindful of their clothing, and you're going to be mindful of perhaps their grooming. And you're going to be making decisions about that in terms of can this person really deliver what I'm asking them to deliver? How professional is this particular firm that I'm dealing with? It also extends to communication materials, so how you communicate with your customers as well. So it's all about those tangible things that you can provide, and that's why a lot of services businesses are in uniform. They're all in a similar type of uniform. It equates to a similarity and a professionalism that comes with that. So when you've got these right surroundings in place, so you've taken a lot of effort to making sure the surroundings and all these physical signs are as they should be, you're going to reduce the customer perceptions of any risk of moving those goods using that particular service. So obviously from a air cargo perspective, they're going to spend a lot of time making sure that they've got the right physical surroundings, particularly if they're dealing with a first-time customer. And the last element of the marketing mix that a services business such as an air cargo carrier needs to be mindful of is the process of service production. So essentially what we're talking about here are the back-end processes that are in place that actually result in the delivery of the goods that you're sending. And it requires careful planning. Now, for your service to be successful, it requires efficient and effective unseen systems in place to deliver this high quality service. So you've got to meet the delivery time, you've got your handling processes, all communications need to be undertaken in the right manner. So these are back-end elements to an air cargo business. So for example, as an example, if you've taken on the idea of matching customers in perhaps a cool chain requirement, if that's a requirement of your target market, then if you haven't got a quality management system in place, it's highly likely that one of those steps through the process is going to fail and that you're not going to be able to deliver on your promise of moving those goods through the supply chain. When one of those steps falls over, it's obviously going to lead to some level of frustration from the customer, and it's quite likely to deal with or result in perhaps low patronage and low customer satisfaction. So ultimately, the last thing that services businesses want to do is not have those processes in place to deliver the service well. Otherwise, those people in the front line are really going to be challenged in their ability to deliver on your promise of moving that air cargo. Now, once you've gone through that process, you're going to enshrine that into a marketing action plan. And the marketing action plan is really a plan that identifies when and whom and the budget associated with delivering this particular marketing plan. And at that point in time, you can sign off on that and you can communicate with the appropriate people within your organisation that your marketing action plan is ready to go. So today, we looked at the marketing environment's impact on the development of the air freight market strategies. We looked about who the customer is in the movement of air cargo. We looked at what the main air freight market segments are. And we looked on how to address the 7 P's of the marketing mix. It's a hypothetical. You're a manager in an international passenger airline. And to date, the airline themselves are pretty happy with that idea. They haven't had to deal with, their main focus has been on passengers. They do carry air cargo, but their main focus is on passengers. So they haven't had to deal with this additional marketing complexity of bringing a freighter into their fleet. Anyway, at the last strategic planning meeting, the facilitator brought along an interesting document. And that document was the Boeing World Air Cargo's forecast, 2018 to 2037. And that was quite insightful to the senior staff that were sitting around the strategic planning process, because it indicated that freighter fleet is expected to grow more than 70% in the next 20 years, which got them thinking about whether they should have a freighter in their fleet. So to that end, the board is really interested in this opportunity, which is presented by adding a freighter into their fleet. And to that end, as a manager with some experience in this particular area, you've been asked to undertake a number of tasks and report back at the end of September. Well, that's quite timely. So your first task is to discuss with examples what issues the airline need to consider in its aircraft evaluation process. So this is worth 10 marks, and the rubric says that you've got to utilise theory and practice to discuss with examples. So there's two elements to how this will be marked. It'll be marked on discussion of issues that need to be considered in this aircraft evaluation process, and also the provision of examples. So discussion and examples. It's 10 marks. You could probably expect discussion 5 marks, examples 5 marks. It's 10 marks out of 35. It's 2,500 words, which equates to about 750 words you would be spending on that. One of the things that has happened on other occasions is that you can find yourself gravitating to areas that are really quite interesting and you want to talk a lot about it, but you're only going to have a certain amount of marks allocated for that. So don't fall into the trap of thinking, gee, this SWOT analysis, this is really interesting. I can provide a lot of data on that, but it's something that you only get a relatively small mark for. So that's the first one. Any questions? Yep. Okay. Now the next one is evaluate each of the identified segments, including examples of the type of products commonly found in each segment. So the rubric says that use an evidence-based approach to present an overview of those segments. Now, this is the segmentation process that we discussed in lecture 4. It's also a reading. So in many ways, it's reviewing that reading and responding to filling in the gaps and providing some additional information. So it's an overview of each of the segments and examples of the types of products commonly found in each segment.
So with regard to that overview, would you be expecting us to have a whole heap of other references, or just mainly keep to what was in that reading as we're doing an overview of the segments in that reading?
Well, look, I wouldn't penalise you for just... Usually I like to see a range, you know, if you put your whole assignment with one reference, I'm thinking, come on.
Within reason.
But what you're saying, I mean, this is directly relating to that. You certainly wouldn't be marked down if you didn't go, if you just focused on the interpretation of that. I think that would be quite appropriate. Now, if you're able to bring something else in, you know, it just might add some value to how you've articulated your answer. Okay, so that's 2. And the third one is in light of choosing a particular target market, provide a marketing plan. And in that marketing plan should be a SWOT, who that target market is that you're going to target with your products, what your marketing objectives are, what your marketing and mix strategies are, and what logistics channel you're going to use to move those goods off the shipper to the market. And what the rubric says is to utilise theory and practice to develop this marketing plan, and that the SWOT analysis is relevant to the case. So the information that you've got in the SWOT analysis is relevant to the case, and that the target market, the customers, the objectives, the mix, are all justified. The thing about marketing is you can justify most things with some supporting evidence. So it's justifying how you're articulating your marketing mix, for example. And I suppose the only note I'd make there is in regards to the SWOT. If you copied my SWOT that I did today, that wouldn't necessarily get you a lot of marks. Essentially, I gave you some high-level elements. So if you looked at one of those elements of the SWOT and you thought government regulation and you spoke about what that could be, then you're getting a tick. So now, how am I going to mark this? This is just notionally, but it'll give you a sense of where you've got to focus your energies. Probably 3 or 4 marks for the SWOT, 1 mark for the target market, 1 mark for the marketing objectives, 1.5 marks for each of the marketing mix, and 1 mark for the logistics channel. Mm-hmm. So if you do a really, really good product strategy, you're getting 1.5 marks. If it's pretty average, you're getting 0.5 mark.